Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're located. My name is Brian Bork, and I am here with Learn On Demand Systems. I am part of our readiness team. My official title is Senior Technical Readiness Trainer, and I am here today to help you embrace the opportunity of scored labs. I hope you can all hear me okay and that everyone is safe, happy, and healthy, or at least two of those three things. Just want to give you a little bit of logistics on your GoToWebinar control panel. On the bottom, you will see a question section. You may have to expand that. If you expand it, you will see an area for you to be able to post a question. This is how you should attempt to let us know if you have questions as we go along. And this is also the area where you would put questions for us to address at the end of the webinar. We will have a question and answer session, and we will be reading off your questions and giving the answers in case I'm not able to answer it as we go. So with that being said, let's dive right into our subject of scored labs. We are going to be covering sort of the basics through to the advanced. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about taking a basic lab as we have in our system, taking that lab and adding scoring activities to it. We're going to start with the basics, which means we'll be doing your typical multiple choice or fill in the blank. Then we'll talk about adding activity-based assessments that check either your virtual machines or virtual machine, or checking the cloud to make sure that things have been done. That is what gives you the power of being able to determine whether or not somebody has actually completed an exercise. And then last but not least, we're going to tie that all together with scoring capability. Now we're going to look at some fairly simple examples to begin with, and then at the end, we'll sort of give you an insight into some of our challenge labs and some of the technology behind those challenge labs and how we put them in place. This is not meant to be the end of the discussion. When we get through with this, I don't want you to feel like, oh yeah, I'm going to go do scored labs. What I really want you to do is I want you to start a discussion about how you can best use lab scoring and put it in place. And I'm going to show you the sort of a couple of hows, and then it's up to you to come up with how you're going to implement it. All right. So if you get stuck at any point, please feel free to ask a question. I see a lot of you out there, and we're really, really happy to have you here. So let's go ahead and dive right in to our demonstration. Here is our basic lab interface. All lab developers have access to it, and we already have an existing lab. In fact, we already have some lab scoring on this lab, but I'm going to show you a couple of sort of tips and tricks and hints as we go to get into the scoring capabilities. The first thing we want to talk about is the fact that you may or may not know that there are two different ways of accessing our lab editor. It's the exact same instruction editor, activity editor, all of the capability is there, but it has sort of two different interfaces, and we're going to show you both of those so that you have an opportunity to see those. When you're working inside of a lab profile, that is a base lab profile, not a child or anything like that, you will have not only the ability to edit that lab profile or launch that lab profile, but you'll also have the ability to edit the instructions. Now, it doesn't say instructions and activities because that would be too long of a button, but this is where your scoring activities will also be placed. So I'm going to click on edit instructions, and notice my screen changes from what I was on. I didn't open a new tab. I changed to the lab instruction editor. This is the place where you work on Markdown. We use a specific flavor of Markdown, but we're not here to talk about instructions. What we're here to talk about is scoring, or turning a lab into a scored lab. So the way we do that is by using what is known as a lab activity. You can see it over here on the left. Now, I want to confess that this is a very basic example of using lab activities. I'm doing some geography and I'm also doing some math. But one thing I want you to note here is the editor is on the left side and the output, or what this is going to look like, is on the right-hand side. But it is important to note that when you, as a lab developer, are editing your instructions and activities, you will see the answers on the right-hand side. As you'll see, once we do a launch and you go in, the students or test takers or end users will not see the answers. These are just for you in here. So I want to make sure that you understand that this first interface I'm showing you is outside of the lab interface. So here we are. We have some basic instructions at the top, which are just sort of welcome to your lab and things like that. And then we dive right in with part one of geography. Now, I'm going to take you in and have you see what these examples look like. And you can see that we do a little bit of geography, a little bit of math, and then we start to get into some computer-based stuff. We're going to cover just the geography and math to get things started here. So if I go in and I click on activities, which is the circle with the lightning bolt here. And when we click on this, you can see a collection of the activities. Now, in our case, the fifth question is the first question listed. And you can see that here, that even though this is called question 5, it's listed first. That's because I actually had it at the end of math and I moved it. So you can actually create these and move them around, even though the numeric order might be different, because they're just reference names, right? So in this activity, what is the southernmost continent on Earth? If I click on edit here, you will see that this is our typical sort of fill in the blank question, and it's a short answer exact match. Now, you choose how exact you want this match to be. By exact match, we mean that the spelling must be exact, but it is not case sensitive unless you check the box here that says case sensitive. All right. So if you check the box that says case sensitive, it will become case sensitive. And then the answer that you have here will be matched for case to what the student submits. So it's important to remember that you choose how exact match you want to do. Now, short answer exact match is a easy way of being able to do this, but sometimes you want a little bit of variation. For example, maybe it is more the format of the response, like what does a typical email address look like, where you have to have a certain number of characters, or you need to have an @ symbol or something like that. So we also have short answer regex match. Now, regex match is short for regular expression match, and that gives you the ability to be able to say so many digits, so many letters, maybe it's got to start with a capital letter and things like that. You can use your typical regex expressions, which are very commonly used in programming. But we're just sticking with a short answer exact match here. Now, again, I'm not using case sensitivity. Now, you'll see some other buttons that are checked here. I'm going to uncheck those just so that you can see the basics of this as we go through. So I'm going to save this. And I just want to show you that the first 4 questions are, or the first 4 activities that we have listed here, are basic math questions, and they are using what are called multiple choice single answer. We also have multiple choice multiple answer available for you to use if you choose to. So we've got these together, and let me close this here. And we're going to talk about automated activities in a little bit, and I'll show you how this works. But let's show you what this looks like inside of the lab interface, and then we'll do some real-time edits inside of the lab interface as well. So I'm going to go ahead and close out this screen. This automatically saves. You can see up here there is a save icon, but I've got it set right now to auto save my work. So the nice thing about our editor is you can choose whether or not you want to save everything you're doing, or if you want, or automatically save what you're doing, or if you would prefer to manually save as you go, so that in case you make a change that you didn't want to make, you can sort of not apply it. But I like to have the features of autosave because it allows me to make changes and have them apply right away without me having to remember to click on autosave. All right. So here we are in standard interface. Now this launch button might appear inside of a TMS. It might be through an API launch or whatever, but inside of our lab interface as lab developers or exam developers, we have a launch button here and we're gonna go ahead and launch. Now I'll minimize the background here and the other background, which I'll be showing later. And here we are inside of our lab / exam, or exam to be, if you will. Right now, these are just activities, meaning we have activities going on, but there's really no there's no checks and balances. We're not scoring this at this point. All we're doing is putting in activities. So we're going to talk about turning on that scoring in a little bit. But in this particular case, I'm just going to put the answer of South America in. I'm going to put in some various answers here. I'm trying to select 3 on every one, but I can't do it on the last one. And I click on next. Now, again, there's no rhyme or reason or plus or minus to me doing these things. So this really isn't being scored. This is just sort of being a knowledge check to see if somebody can fill in the answers, but that's not really what we're here to talk about. So now I'm going to take you into an editor inside the lab interface, and you will see that I have the capability of editing my instructions, and I still have the formatter here. I have the editor, I should call it, not formatter, on the left-hand side, and now I've got my real-world example on the right-hand side. So if I go into my activities here, helps if I hit the right button. There we go. If I hit my activity and I'm going back into my what is the southernmost continent on Earth, I can do a couple of things. One, I could turn on scoring for this whole system, which we're going to do right at the end. But first, I could do what we call on-demand evaluation. Now, on-demand evaluation says, here, check my work. So all I'm going to do right now is turn it on, and I'm going to click on save. And I click on close, and my lab has automatically saved. I'm going to close that window, and I'm going to refresh my page just to make sure that I've got the most recent one. All right, so here is my answer I put in, and I'm going to click on check. Oh, that's not the right answer. However, I don't have any consequence of getting the wrong answer because I can continue on. All right, so now we're going to modify this one more time. And we are going to go into our southernmost question again. And this time, instead of just having on-demand evaluation, I'm going to say, 1, allow retries, and 2, I'm going to block page navigation until answered, which means if they don't answer, I'm going to block the page, which means it can't go to the next page. And if they don't get it correct, I'm going to block the page. Now there's some consequence for getting a wrong answer. So I'm going to click on save and close out. Now, once again, just going to refresh my page here to make sure that I've got my instructions up to date. And here we go. So now I'm going to say South America, and I'm going to click on next. Notice it says required. And here, when I click on next, it says, please complete all required activities. So now I'm going to do a check here. Nope, still have it wrong. Still can't advance. So now let's go ahead and put the right answer in. Now I am going to actually put in, not America, sorry, Antarctica. All right, now notice that I'm doing it lowercase, and I'm doing that on purpose because one of the things that I did was I did not turn on exact case sensitivity. So I click on this and it says correct, and now I click on next and it lets me through. Now, this is a way of actually developing learning without turning this into an exam. Yes, you have to get this answer correct before you move on, or at least you need to answer it before you move on, which means that you're putting forth some effort. So you can make the determination whether or not you want these things in place. All right. So we're not going to deal with the math questions at this point, but I just wanted to give you sort of an idea of where we're at. Now, we're going to start talking about interactivity with the virtual machines in this particular case. I want you to know that this could apply to virtual machines within a lab. It can apply to virtual machines in the cloud, and it can apply to actual cloud services like AWS and Azure. We can actually check to make sure that things are getting done inside of those tools. Now, there's a couple of ways of approaching this. Now, I'm showing you here the first example, which is we're referencing the number of icons on the desktop of the virtual machine to the left. Well, that's good. That really, it helps us ask questions that are asking questions about what is here. But you have to be careful with these types of questions because, for example, somebody could delete or create an extra icon on the desktop or an extra set of icons on the desktop, and they could say, well, there were 6 icons on the desktop after I deleted one. So you have to word the question correctly, and you have to make sure that you're doing good instructional design with this, and we can certainly help you with that with our professional services team. But there is a right answer or a wrong answer. Now, I am going to click on next, and you notice that I didn't have to answer that section. That's because I, once again, did not have the requirement for moving forward. So this is one way of I shouldn't say simulating. It's a way of using a VM and using questions about that VM. But the next question is much more detailed and has a little bit more interactivity with the virtual machine. So let's take a look at this really quick. I'm going to go ahead and edit my instructions, and we are going to take a look at the last activity here, which is Lab Activity Automated 1. Now, Lab Activity Automated 1 is, does the file exist, or file exists, question mark. And when we edit this, you will see that we have a couple of things. First of all, if you're using this integrated or activity-based assessment, you are going to have to either score it or turn it into an on-demand evaluation. You can't use this, or there's no purpose of using this if you're not using it to either check their work while they're going, or have them check their work while they're going, or count it as a question in a exam. So this one has on-demand evaluation. It does allow retries until you get it correct, and it blocks you from going through the lab until you're all done. So we've got a little bit of feedback here, both positive and incorrect answer feedback. And then we've got your basics of how you do this. Now you'll notice that my screen here is needs a little width. So we are using a target, and that means that we have 2 different virtual machines inside of this lab. So we can pick which virtual machine we're submitting this to, and then we are submitting it in PowerShell, giving us a choice of PowerShell command line or command shell and or bash. So we can send these requests in different formats. Now, I don't want to bore you by teaching PowerShell, but I'm just going to give you the basics of what this PowerShell does. It is taking a look at get child item, which is to list all of the items. And those items will go through and they will essentially parse this folder called C users setup desktop. And it is looking for anything that has star.txt, okay? So that works perfectly because our question is to create a file called test.txt on the desktop, which is for this particular user. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to say the result equals false, which is our default. We are assuming that the result is false. If it is null, in other words, if our result has no result, that means there are no files that end in .text, and so therefore it is definitely going to be false. And then the final result equals true is set if we do find a text file. Now, when we do this, we are looking for the test and any word, test1, test2, test ABC .text. In other words, the word test must fall within it, and that gives us the capability of being able to put this in place. All right, so that is what it looks like. Now, let's take a look at how it performs. So here we are. Notice that we have an instruction here to switch to a virtual machine, and we have what we call a lab replacement token in place, where I click on that and it automatically switches me to the next virtual machine. I've got to put my password in here real quick. There we go. Go back to my instructions. Now here I am, nice clean desktop, easy to use. And I'm going to go ahead and just try to trick it and say, I've already done this. So go ahead and check. And it does take a little bit of time. No, sorry, we didn't get it. There's no text files on the desktop. If I try to end the lab, it will not let me end it until I actually complete this activity. So I'm going to go ahead and put a new text file on the desktop, and I'm going to call it Brian. By the way, it automatically assumes .txt on this. So that's because I made it a text document. So I made it a file on the desktop, but I did not make one called test. All right, so now I'm going to rename this test. And just to, for some extra credit, if you will, I'm going to go ahead and put another document and call it test A. All right, now I'm going to check. Look at that. Not only did I complete it, the following test files exist. Text files, not test files. And then I can actually end my lab and say, yep, I'm done, and I'm going to close it. Now, let's return back here, and I'm going to launch it one more time. But before I do that, we're going to actually talk about value here. And this is where we talk about sort of turning this in to an exam instead of just making sure that parts and pieces of this are getting completed as you go through. And the way we do that is by turning on scoring. Oops, sorry, I'm in the wrong window. Here we go. I'm going to turn on scoring, and I'm going to edit my instructions outside of the lab interface. Once again, showing you the two different editors. I shouldn't say that. Same editor, two different looks and feels. But I'm going to go into my activities, and right at the top is a checkbox or a switch for enable scoring. I enable scoring. You can see here, show scoring result upon completion. Now, this is a choice you need to make. Do you want to give the end user the results of their exam or their scored lab, or do you want to be the only one who can see those? And I'll show you how those appear in just a minute. But you also set the passing score. Now, when you set the passing score, you'll notice here that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and that is the passing score is 4 out of 7. Now, you could set this to 7 out of 7. You could set it out as 1 out of 7 to make sure they get an answer correct. But long story short, you determine what the passing score is, and you can also weight these by giving an extra score value. So for example, if you want this one to be worth 2 points as opposed to 1 point, you can put that in place. So that's it. That's all it takes to turn this in. One quick note, when you turn on scoring, you have to make sure your activities actually have the checkbox for scored. Otherwise, it does not, it doesn't allow it. All right, I shouldn't say that. It will still put the question in place. It'll still make it a part of the test, but it will not be a scored activity. This is very helpful if you have a question you're not quite sure if you're going to use, like maybe you're beta testing a question or something like that. You can leave it as unscored, and then even though they may have taken, 63 questions, only 62 of those questions will actually be scored, something like that. All right, so I have all of my activities scored. I'm going to show the scoring results upon completion, and I'm going to go ahead and close. And I will save this, and I will launch my lab one last time. All right, so here we are. I'm going to put in the incorrect answer here. I'll put in a couple of correct answers in my math, but not all of them. All right, and I'll go to next. Oh, I have to score because remember I have it set that I must get this complete and I must get it correct as well. So now I score it and I go to next. How many icons appear on the desktop? I'm going to say a lot. And because I have to actually complete this one, I can't submit until this one is done. I'm going to go ahead and click on Windows 10 participant. I'm going to go ahead and put the password in, and I'm going to put a test document on the desktop and score it. Now, if you put these scoring checks in for the end users, they're going to know whether or not they've got them. So typically, you would remove the in-lab check so that you could just click on submit. And when you click on submit, it submits it for grading. Does take a little bit of time to do that. And congratulations, you passed. I am one of the smartest. I got 5 out of 7. So now a question that often comes up for lab developers or exam writers is, how do I see what the outcome of these questions are? Well, you actually get a little item at the top when you turn on scoring. You get a link at the top of your lab profile that says view exam results. And if I view this, you will see that I completed this one here, and I can click on the details and I can see which ones I got correct. And notice that the green ones are the ones I got correct and the red ones are the ones I got wrong. And you can see here which number I selected, which is like 11, and which one is the correct answer, which is 8. You can see here I selected 13 and it was 7, and I got this file in place and I got the response here. This gives you a wonderful, wonderful way of being able to review exam results. And when people say, no, I answered that correctly, you have the ability to be able to show them, no, this is your, this is your result as we see it. Now, I love this. I could stop right here, but I would just want to show you sort of to what level you could take this to without turning it into a certification exam. So I'm going to bring up a example that we have in our existing challenges. This is, can you administer and monitor a Windows Server 2016? And once again, this is checking against a VM instead of checking against the cloud, but the cloud does work. And I saw a question come in about platform, and we'll talk about that in just 1 second when we get to the question and answer session. So thanks for the questions. Keep the questions coming in if you have any. But I just want to show you real quick what these instructions look like. And when I go into the instructions here, you will see that we are giving this very, very basic statements of do this, do that, and then we run our system, we pass it through our system to make sure that you have done what is in place. So if I go to these activities, notice that this is scored, and all of these activities are, there's multiple sections to each activity. So I'm just going to go in and look at check files here, for instance, which has a score of 6. And what we mean by a score of 6 is there are actually 6 different scripts in here, and you can add each of these. You can see here, new script. And each one of those is checking to make sure certain things have been done. In this particular case, we're checking on DC1 whether or not somebody actually created a file and it contains certain things. Like in this case, it's an event log containing system. Here's one where we're checking the contents of a process list that somebody was obtaining using PowerShell for a specific machine. So the real power of this comes from putting simple instructions, not detailed point here, click here, do this type of instructions, but very simple instructions of what we want them to accomplish, and then writing scripts that will go in and check to see whether or not those are done. This is sort of the perfect marriage between instructional design, wording the questions properly, and a little bit of technical knowledge about how VMs work and what the task actually needs to be in order to make sure that we can check to see whether or not it's been done. So if you want to check those out, we have these challenges available. Our account executives would be more than happy to give you some basic access to them and be able to check those out. So with that being said, let me go back to my slides and move forward here. There are some additional resources available for you, and those resources are located at LODS.one, or as I say it, LODS.1/PBT and scoring. And you can find out information about adding IDLX activities, which is kind of what we covered here, some SSH terminal access that you can use for being able to determine whether or not something's been done in Linux. And then last but not least, a PBT or performance-based testing overview. All those things and many more are located on that site. I would also like to say that in August, we're going to be having a webinar about performance-based testing and how all of these questions and answers and things like that all tie together into a true performance-based test that you can use for things more than just certification. You can actually validate skills and things like that. So it's really, really important. The next webinar that's coming up is our solution overview. We really enjoy doing this. Myself and Jane do a great presentation on sort of the full offering of Learn on Demand systems, all the way from the basics of lab development all the way into scheduling and delivery through our TMS. And we have that coming up on Tuesday, July 14th. Then on Thursday, July 16th, I am going to be back here and giving you the secret of life cycle actions. I came up with that title myself. I'm very proud of it. You can check these out at LODS1/overview and LODS.1 feature demos, not just mine coming up next week, but also some of the other ones that are coming out as well. And last but not least, and this is an important one for all of you out there who are already customers, it is important to note our CEO, Corey Hines, leader extraordinaire of Learn on Demand systems, is going to be talking about all the newest technologies that have been released recently, and also some of the ones that are going to be coming. You do not want to miss that. That's coming up on Tuesday, July 21st. Information and registration links will be in a follow-up email that you will receive after this webinar. So with that, I want to thank you very much for your time and attendance today, and I'm going to take a few moments to answer a couple of questions that I saw that came up